Google ads versus Facebook ads. This is the age-old debate when it comes to the paid advertising landscape. A lot of people have a hard time knowing where to spend their money first. In this video, what I want to do is go over the pros and cons of both. There's not necessarily one ultimate winner, but there are use cases for both, and there are areas that you'd want to spend money first on both. So that being said, let's jump right in. The general overview of what we're going to be going over is going to be, is one better? Like we talked about, there's definitely pros and cons. We'll talk about what those are. What types of products work best for each platform, which is very, very important. This is almost going to be the core of the conversation here. And then the pros and cons of Google and the pros and cons of Facebook. Obviously, as we are Google centric, we've spent 50 million plus on the platform profitably today with our clients. So we've had quite a bit of experience with the platform. On the Facebook side, we've dabbled in it. Also, I've have a lot of good friends in the space who have spent millions and millions of dollars. So we have a really good grip on the pros and cons. So we'll talk about that. But moving forward, is one better? So I'll start by saying they're kind of two sides of the same coin. They do assist each other in some ways. Facebook, as most people know, is very top funnel, cold traffic type platform because you're creating your own market. Now, there are pros and cons of creating your own market. We'll talk about that in one of the slides too. But it isn't always like pick one and spend all your money on it. You could run both at the same time. In most stores, especially on the e-com side, once they get to a certain level on one platform, they'll start to diversify. But depending on where you're at, definitely recommend eventually using both because one isn't just absolutely better than the other. There's just different uses for both. So the next is going to be each has their own strength. So I mentioned this briefly. Facebook's really great on creating a market. Google is very good on capturing intent and capturing a market. Now, there are reasons to go into each of them. I mentioned a couple times in certain videos because you have the ability to capture intent on the PPC side. If you're trying to get proof of concept on a product, a lot of the times Google's a great way to start with that because you can fixate on certain people searching certain things. So if you're trying to sell, wool socks, you're going to go after people who are searching things like where to find the best wool socks in 2024, whatever it is, people who are already in the market of buying that product. And then you're just testing whether or not your product can stand in the market and if it's going to sell or not. So there's definitely strengths there. On the Facebook side, there's a lot of scalability. When it comes to scalability, because you're creating the market, there's huge, massive audiences you can scale into. And you're not really limited on the amount of people who are searching certain terms. So we'll talk more on that. But which you should use. Like I mentioned, if you're just starting out with your store, Google's a great platform to start testing the viability of your products. On Facebook, if you have really good creatives and it's a unique product, people are going to buy it if they're compelled to with your creatives. Really, really great platform to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks because the algorithm carries so much weight. So if you have either an established product that you've developed and it's not like drop shipping or things of that nature, Facebook's a great platform to start pushing your content out and feeling if people on the cold market side are going to convert. On the Google side, if you have products that are high intent and people are searching for them and they fall into a normal market or not something super unique, great platform to start testing the viability on those. So going on to the types of products. So I just touched on that briefly. New products are going to be more centric to creating the market. If you have a product that people don't really know exists yet, that's where Facebook really shines. That's going to give you the ability to get into a cold traffic area environment and then see if your creatives will actually be able to convert that type of traffic. So when it comes to new products, generally will lead towards the Facebook side. When it comes to products with existing demand, this is where Google's time to shine is. It's going to be where you have the ability to go after people who are searching already the type of product you have, send them to your products, and then see if the creative and the brand and the offer is going to be able to convert that. So really think it's contingent on either a new product or existing demand for the product. And then depending on the two of those that's where you'd go to Facebook or Google, like I just explained. And then one thing to keep in mind is the competitiveness of a product. You have to remember that when people are going to Google and they're searching for a certain type of product, they're seeing every competitor that pops up. You're going to see, especially if you're like drop shipping a product or you have a product that's developed but it's very similar to others. On the shopping network, for example, you're going to see 6 to 7 products that are very similar. And it's not super hard to stand out, but it is easier to stand out on the Facebook side where people are only seeing your product. So if you have an ultra competitive market, sometimes it is better, even if it's an established product that people are have demand for, to go to the Facebook side because when you're on Facebook, it's more pattern interrupt. So if you're getting in front of somebody, they're seeing your creatives, they're getting compelled to buy. They don't know about all the other variations that are out there, and it all happens in that little window. That's a good area that I would say, okay, maybe Facebook's the best bet. But if it's not super competitive and there's demand for the product, then Google all day long. So Next thing is Google Ads, pros and cons. So a couple of the cons are high CPMs. This is the cost that these platforms charge to show your ad. Google works a little bit different because you're familiar with cost per click. Cost per click is going to be the amount it charges to have somebody click on your ad. It does boil down to CPM, which is the amount people, Google or Facebook will charge to show your ad to 1,000 people. But with Google Ads, it populates as CPC, right? And when you're going after intent-based traffic, you have a much more expensive cost per click compared to a lot of times on the Facebook side, but that's because you're paying for the intent. And most of the time when you're paying for intent, you have a much higher conversion rate. So although the CPC, which is the cost per click, is higher on the Google side, because it's so specific traffic wise, it's going to have a higher conversion rate, which is going to lessen the cost anyways. So there's kind of a balance there. One thing though is on the Google side, you do have a lot of the times smaller markets because you're not creating the market a lot of the times with Google search. You don't have the capacity to just scale. You're going to get into what we call horizontal scaling, which is scaling into as much traffic exists in that traffic niche or that keyword niche. And then you have to move on because at the end of the day, there's only a certain amount of people searching each keyword per month in the market. A couple pros are traffic quality, traffic control. And we talked about that, having the ability to fixate on specific types of traffic and then having that variable fix so you don't have to worry about whether or not the actual traffic's an issue or the assets are an issue. Intent factor, this is going to be how you control the actual quality of intent. So intent is going to be, once again, the intention behind somebody searching something. It's very, very easy to deduct what intent is for a certain keyword you're going after when you're doing keyword research and really figuring out, are they top of funnel, bottom of funnel? You don't have that control on the Facebook side. Next is going to be consistency. When it comes to Google, one thing you'll see on the other platforms is you get a lot of crash and burns when it comes to the platform campaigns. Next is going to be the consistency. When it comes to Google, the campaigns, once they perform, are very consistent. Unless there's a huge market disruptor, a lot of times once you figure out something works, it'll keep running at that level or allow you to scale. If you can't scale, it'll at least plateau and stay consistently at that level while you find other areas to scale into, start scaling horizontally. When it comes to platforms like Facebook, TikTok, things like that, you'll get a lot of creative burnout. You get campaigns that do really well for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, then they crash. You got to figure it out. You don't have that problem on the Google side. Super, super consistent as you see what works. Of course, there's maintenance, but it's nowhere near as volatile as these other platforms. When it comes to Facebook ads, one of the big cons is you're going after top of funnel targeting. So you're taking completely cold audiences with, of course, interests that apply to your products, but you have to do all the legwork on getting them to convert, taking them from top of funnel through your content to eventually the buying cycle and getting them to purchase. On Google, you don't really have to deal with that because you already can go after and cherry pick the high intent type traffic. So Facebook is more scalable, but you have to do a lot more work on the content side to get them from high funnel to bottom of the funnel. Next to me, creating your own market. Just talked about this a little bit. You have to do that work. Very often, very rare, should I say, will you get into a market or an audience type and it'll just like convert like crazy. A lot of times it comes down to how good the creative is on the Facebook side, which means a lot of creative work and a lot of videos, a lot of that high production style type of content. Sometimes you can get away with like UGC and things of that nature, but most of the time you will have to invest in content where you don't really have to do that on the Facebook side because you're just writing text ads. Next is going to be volatility. I talked about this on the last slide. Facebook will have those crashes and burns. Of course, you will have a lot of scalability and you'll open up your own market and create it, but it's because you had to do the work to make that happen. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a pro and con as to is the platform consistent or not. A couple of the big pros on Facebook is the scalability. Scalability is huge if you can crack the right type of content. If you knock out the content from the park, you're going to have a lot of room to scale because you're creating that market. Next is going to be creating your own market. Just talked about that. And then Facebook's algorithm. So Facebook's algorithm is very, very strong. It's done a killer job when it comes to figuring out who's gonna purchase and who's gonna purchase your type of product, especially with the interest. Google wasn't always like that. They've gotten a lot better the last couple of years when it comes to Google as a platform, but because they started falling into what Facebook was doing. So when it comes to Facebook, it definitely makes us Google advertisers a little bit jealous because on the Facebook side, if you have the good content and you have general interest, like you don't have to do much more than that. It's going to scale out. Google side, it takes a lot more work on the setup, but once you get there, it's consistent. Facebook takes more work on the creative side, but once you knock out that creative, you're just gonna be able to scale to the moon, which is great. So like I've mentioned, there's a lot of pros and cons to both, and there's definitely use cases for both. Rarely ever will you just want to do one, but when it comes to which one to start with, it definitely falls into those factors we talked about earlier in the video. And then once you get to the point where you can afford scaling out on both, or at least testing on both, that's going to be the move. That way you can capitalize on both types of markets. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe. If you have any comments, throw them in the comment section. We'll get to them.